Hello friends, Ken here, your Thrifty Apprentice. Happy Wednesday everyone, and welcome back to another Thrifty review. It's been a minute, right? In today's quick review, we're going to be taking a look at Vivart Art Supplies 48 premium solid watercolors. And it just so happens that the demo that we do today will hit the prompt for day 31 of World Watercolor Month 2024. And that prompt is shell. So we'll get to that in just a moment. But let's dive right in here looking at the Vivart Art Supplies 48 Premium Solid Watercolors. Craft the moment, connect to your created self, and paint your future. Now, it comes in combination with the Vivart Art Supplies watercolor paper pad, cold press 300G. They have matching designs on the front of the box and the pad here. The back of that pad is blank. There's quite a bit of paper in it. And if I had to guess a weight on it, because it's actually quite flexible and thin. If I had to guess the weight on it, I'd say somewhere around 80 or 90 pounds. It's got a interesting texture on it. It's sized pretty interesting, and we'll get around to that in just a moment. So, the back of the box here does say, we believe creativity is at the heart of all of us. Connect with your creative self and feel empowered. Inspired and entertained by our products and community. We are here to support you at every step of your journey, from the first stroke of the paintbrush to your masterpiece. This set contains a watercolor ebook course, a watercolor brushes, and a watercolor paper pad. Designed in the United States, conforms to ASTM 4236. It does say non-toxic. And there's a QR code here that my finger is covering that you can scan with your camera phone for a free watercolor painting ebook course. Side of the box does say the product is made in China, although we did see designed in the US. And pretty straightforward, simple, kind of like, they kept it crafty in my opinion. And it's so funny that the front of the box says craft the moment. And that's really kind of the feel I was getting from the overall design appeal of the entire set. So the 48 half pans come in a plastic palette. We've seen designs like this before from other budget companies. Pretty common to see them now. No ring on the bottom. The palette opens into 48 individual half pans that are clipped down into individual sections, and we'll talk about the relevance of that in just a minute. But as you can see, you can remove those sections, and from the section you can remove the half pan, and from the half pan you can actually remove the paint because it's simply glued in. So you can get a like X-Acto knife or something kind of thin and sharp and kind of wiggle those paints out if you wanted to remove the paints and continue to use the half pans in the panning system. So you do have 8 individual modules that fit in. So you could remove all of them if you wanted to. Not sure why. And then, of course, the mixing wheels are all at the top. This module will remove from the top as well and give you a flat bed if you just want to use that. All right. Inside the kit, there are 2 paint brushes. There is a number 12 and a number 8 round, both pretty generically manufactured. I will say I do like the fact that none of the lacquer was chipped. It did have very clear printing that didn't have any issues with that at all. I would say that, I don't know if I would say that's a number 8. I'd probably call that somewhere more around a number 6, but it's a pretty nice brush. My issue with this one is that immediately out of the set, the ferrule on the brush is loose. Now I can rectify that by simply using a pair of pliers or vice grips in order to tighten that ferrule. But I do think it's important to note that, you know, you may end up with a loose ferrule brush if you decided to get this set. The number 12 brush, I did not find any issues with. They are golden Teflon, so they are synthetic, and they're kind of mixed for cross-media use, meant for cross-media use. I did use these in the practice painting for today's demo, and for all intents purposes, they are okay. But, you know, I would not, you know, just say that they're the best brushes on the market, and I did have a loose ferrule. There's a sponge included, I guess, if you wanted to use on-the-go painting. So that is pretty much straightforward what the set looks like. There is no wrapping. There is none of the relevant information that you may be looking for when it comes to a watercolor paint set. There is no light fast, no pigment, no transparency, no any information like that of the sort. Now, I did try to resource that information on the internet. I did find that there are some other people who have used this set, but no one has presented any information on pigments at the moment. Now, what I will say is I did kind of do some digging around into my other different palettes. I did some digging around into some manufacturing sites that I know of, trying to see if maybe I could find a palette that not only resembled the design of the palette, but actually the look of the paints. Up until this point, I still haven't found anything. I kind of thought maybe, you know, this might be a superior repeat, but after using them, I don't think these are superior paints. And we're going to get into why I don't think they are in just a moment. I'm not sure what these are, but definitely a white label budget grade set. So as you can see, you get quite a lot of paint. There are a lot of colors. There are a lot of convenient colors, and I'm pretty sure that there are a lot of mixes in here. So I did take time to swatch the paints out. Of course, those half pans are machine cut and glued in, as I said earlier. They re-wet or they wet okay. I did find that it was probably best to pre-wet this set before you started to paint with it. And then the actual paint half pans dried pretty quickly. They don't really suck up water, but they don't just stay super wet a long time. But I definitely would say pre-wet. Now, after drying, I will say that I did not find a huge issue with re-wetting. A drop of water on top of one of the half pans reactivated the paint in a few seconds. So that was all good and dandy. But they would get mushy real quick, you know. After that drop of water on there and they've had time to reactivate, like definitely mix them out on the palette, because you don't want like goops and globs of paint on your paintbrush as you go to your paper. So I definitely found it, you know, helpful to mix them out on the palette. I did let some dry down here so that you would be able to see what they look like once they dry down on the palette. There's no flaking, so that's a good thing. But, you know, they just have that overall budget grade watercolor set, if you know what I mean. So, as I was saying, I swatched the paints out. I did put them down on an opacity line in order to give that a test. I found what I can see on this line is that pretty much every single color, with the exception of the reds for the most part, or maybe 3 of the reds, left some type of sedimentation either on the line or completely blocked the line out. So this is definitely an opaque set of paints. This is not the set of paints you're going to go and grab if you're looking to be able to layer, build a lot of realism with transparent layers on top of each other. I really do believe that a lot of these paints are mixed with a white, possibly PW6, or a chalk of something of that nature. There is no doubt in my mind, well, I'm saying there's no doubt in my mind, I just really feel it based on what I know about paints, that they do have optical brighteners in them or dyes in order to boost the colors, because it's not a lot of pigment. It's a lot of color, but it's a lot of filler in it as well. Because they are so opaque, I found it really hard to really kind of layer them up, you know. So my suggestion would be, if this is a set that you got, I would definitely use it in like 1 layer washes to paint, maybe greeting cards, a little something you're doing in some type of journal, like an art journal or a junk journal, where you're just using 1 layer of paint or really watery layers. Because I will say that the paints did not get gritty in their washes, which I thought was a good thing. But you can definitely see it from the water. The water gets muddy pretty fast. And they don't get gritty, but there is definitely a film to them. Like, oh, I really wish I could think of the word I was trying to think of. But they have, you can just tell that there is something added to it to just kind of make the paint thicker. So next I did some color mixing, and I did split temperatures here. I have, let's see, a bright red, a lemon yellow, and a peacock blue, which actually mix to give pretty clean colors, but you have to have it watered down. There wasn't a big shift from wet to dry in this particular example on the paper that was included in the pack. But if you put it in a really watery wash, it's definitely going to shift a lot. But that's pretty much the case with any paint. Here was going for gray with the ultramarine and the burnt sienna. Now for me, the ultramarine was super weak. There's 2 included in the set. There is a ultramarine light and a French ultramarine. Well, the French ultramarine does not look like a French ultramarine at all. Not sure what color that is. It definitely leans more so towards a cobalt than a French ultramarine. And then the ultramarine light actually looks more like regular ultramarine, but I don't know, not quite deep enough. It's weird. Then the color right beside that, which I forgot to show this, is called deep blue, which in all honesty would probably be the deep that you would be looking for when we're talking about ultramarine. So I don't know, just kind of really funny colors when you wet the pellets as the paint is dissolving on the top. You can see sort of like a white milky cloud, even in colors that you wouldn't expect to see a white coming from. So again, another indication that there's some type of fillers in there. Now there's this little color chart included inside when you open it up that lays out the colors in their little sections. It gives them a number and a name, but again, still no pigment information, no light fast information, anything of that nature. But you get a lot of colors. You definitely get a lot of colors. You get a lot of colors that are pretty saturated. They're just opaque and not truly meant for a lot of mixing, although the mixing did come out okay. Here a magenta, regular yellow, just more of a neutral tone yellow, and French ultramarine, or what they're calling French ultramarine, which I'm sorry, that's just not what that is. And then here there was the French ultramarine in the brown, which is the more burnt sienna color. Now, I was trying to see if I can get a cooler gray than I was getting here with the burnt sienna, which I was able to. But you can see the texture in it. It's just, yeah, interesting set of paints. So here I did a salt test, which they reacted pretty well to salt. But what I did find is with that salt test that the salt stuck in the paint. It was the weirdest thing. Normally I can just kind of like knock the granules off the top and they'll just go away easy. But with this one, I really had to just kind of scrub the paper. It's almost as if the salt was glued to it. Excuse me. Weirdest thing. Here I was going to do a lift test with you guys, as I always do. I put down a couple of colors here. And I'm just gonna wet this. I really need to get another scrubber. This is a nylon scrubber. But as you see how easily those paints lift. Now, it shouldn't be that every single color lift the same. In our more professional sets where we have paints that have different characteristics. You're going to have some that lift well, some that stain a little, some that won't move at all because they stain a lot. But here what you see are several different colors across the range of everything there, where they all just kind of lift out the same. Except for that pink. That pink is super, super, super staining. So, I mean, without a doubt, there are dyes, especially in those really, really bright, bright colors. All right. Wrapping this up with saying that I did a preliminary painting demo with them. I really want to just trying to get a feel for them. I'll be honest, after swatching them out, I was already at the point of, especially after doing the color mixing wheel, I was like, I don't know about these, but I'm gonna go ahead and give it a shot. So the first thing I did was this little preliminary painting with them, where I was just kind of practicing before I did the demo. And I was just kind of mimicking what I saw on the front of the box in the paper pad. Yeah. Speaking of the paper is okay. It's a really thin weight. I think it is a pretty decent practice paper. Maybe even a pretty decent paper to do swatches on. But beyond that, it's not anything that's robust. It ripped really easily when I was tearing it off of the block. And I mean, super easily. I ripped more than one piece, actually, tearing it off. So the paper definitely will not stand up to much. And if it's ripping that easy, I doubt if it's gonna stand up to much layering. Although here, I was able to get about 2 layers on there. I did have a couple of feathered edges that I had to go clean up because the paint seemed to want to feather a little bit on the paper. So that's just something to keep in mind about the paper that's included in the demo. So there you have that, my friends. So now what I want to do is go ahead and jump into a final demo with the paints. We're going to knock out day 31 of World Watercolor Month, which is shell. And then I'll come back and wrap this video up by talking about the price and giving you my final thoughts on this set. As we jump into this demo section, let me warn you guys that I did lose a little footage. So I had to do some kind of special editing here to try to get this together so that you guys will be able to see what I did. So I started out after transferring the composition to the paper and wetting the entire shell. And now I'm going in and I'm just dropping in color. Here I'm using just the regular, it's just called yellow. It's the more neutral yellow in the set, I guess. It does lean a little bit golden. And now I'm going and dropping in some teal, I guess it would be their kind of imitation of cobalt teal. The paint had no flow to it really, except the really super bright colors, which I'm sure they flowed the way they did because of dye. But I did mix that yellow and that kind of tealy, bluey green color into really wet water, a really, really wet wash. I knew it would shift, but it would sort of give me a really light, airy feel. I wanted to try to keep this as kind of loose and light as I possibly could. After I got the shell kind of painted on the base layer the way I wanted, I did remove some highlights with a studio tile that I had. I'm gonna go in here, paint the middle section or the inside of the shell. You're gonna see me paint it maybe 2 or 3 times until I get the color depth that I wanted. At a certain point, I'm going to notice that the paint starts to streak and really retain brush strokes and lift it a little bit even. At this point, I'm using those 2 colors that I've been using. I did mix in some ultramarine and ultramarine light, which again don't really remind me of ultramarine, but the blues did help me to darken up some of the shades that I was using. And eventually I'm gonna go in and use the color called Deep Blue that's in the set, which it looks a little bit like phthalo blue. It's gonna get incorporated in a little bit later on. This is really simple, the base layer of paint. And then using sort of still watery layer, I'm going in and painting on, I guess you could call them the stripes on the shell. and I'm angling them from the corner of each one. Now, if you guys can hear that TV in the background of this voiceover, I really, really apologize about that. I did not realize it was as loud as it is. But I'm going to push on through because this voiceover is pretty quick. So you're going to definitely see that I'm just taking my time and wiggling my brush. I'm using that number 8 brush that came in the set. I did use both that number 12 and the number 8 in order to do this composition, just to make sure that I did have enough practice with them to offer an opinion on them. Now, as I paint in these watery stripes using like that cobalt or tilly color, or using the mixture I made from the cobalt teal and I think it was the ultramarine light, which, you know, one of the lighter blues in the set, because I still refuse to truly call any of these colors ultramarine. I'm sort of dropping that into the washes to kind of get a little bit of saturation and contrast going on around the shell. Now, this particular part, I'm kind of showing you all of it. It didn't really skip through because this is actually the meat of the composition. You know, once you get that watery layer down, the next thing is really just adding the stripes. And the stripes are sort of the detail. You can really quit, stop. If you feel that you like this composition, once you get those stripes in, I say, hey, leave it like that because it is cute and really airy and loose. And I was liking the composition at this point. I'm going to start to run into a little trouble when I go to do the center, which I think that's actually the footage I may have lost if I'm not mistaken. You'll see me kind of start it here, and then I'm going to kind of work that color in because I didn't really like the way that that line came out. So I'm going to take just water on the brush and work that color in, which was another indication that they were student budget grade paints that had quite a few fillers in it, because it was just too easy for me to move colors around. And wet washes, wet on dry washes, it didn't matter. They would lift and they would move. So I guess, you know, depending on how you look at it, that could be a good or a bad thing. So I'm just kind of getting the indication of where I want the center of that shell to swirl around. And then I'm going to go in and start adding more color to the inside of the shell. Ultimately, it's going to be painted with a mixture of like the phthalo bluish color mixed with the brown in the set, which is the more burnt umber leaning color. At this particular point, I do believe this is where I actually lost the footage. And again, I really do apologize. But the only thing that I do from this point after getting the inside of that shell, the saturation that I wanted, was to mix up a darker color, as you can see here, and then just kind of go over the inside of the shell again, as well as going around the outside of the shell and putting more detail and indication in the middle. And that pretty much wraps that up, my friends. So here we have this, my friends, our finished composition. I did try my best to keep this loose. I didn't want to paint anything that would require a lot of layering. So this is what came out of that. I don't know. I struggled a little bit with the center of that there. I just kind of had to make something up on the spot, and it became more of a whimsical shell. But again, working with it in watered down washes, working with it in with layers like that, it worked well. But the thicker it gets, the more it wants to streak or leave like heavy brush strokes in the in your washes. Even with the edges here, as the paint got thicker, it really picked up the brush strokes, which allowed me to leave texture, which I guess on one hand is a good thing if that's what you're looking for, but it may be hard to control if it's not what you're looking for. Overall, the composition came out okay. It's definitely not the best thing I've ever painted, probably not the worst thing I've ever painted, but there you have day 31 of World Watercolor Month with your shell. Do stay tuned. We will be doing a complete flip through of all of the paintings I did during the 31 days of World Watercolor Month for July 2024. And I will be doing a review on the paper that I've been using throughout the month, which is that Soho Urban Artist watercolor paper pad. All right, so with that being said, let's get down to the nitty gritty. For what it's worth, my friends, the paint set is okay. You can use it to paint. If you have it, it is already, and it's in your arsenal. Using it to practice with, knock yourself out. Using it to maybe do just color sketchbook work that you're going to close up in a sketchbook, or coloring book work that you're going to close up in a coloring book. You're just doing it to try to build some skills and get some practice down. This may help. This may be okay. I mean, I do feel like you will have some limitations simply because of the way the paints are formulated, and there are just some things I don't feel like they're gonna really allow you to do. With that being said, you do have 48 pretty bright colors that do not have a huge shift from wet to dry. So that's definitely a positive. The paints will paint out well. You can use them in a watery wash, and they can be built upon to a certain point before they like become streaky or start to retain your brush strokes. The current market price for this set, and I wrote it on the inside lid of the box, I do believe it's $29.99. Let's see. It's on the inside somewhere. I'm sure it is. But the problem is, y'all know how I am with boxes. And we may be here all day. Okay. $28.99 on Amazon. So right now they're currently $28.99 on Amazon. I'm gonna be honest. If you're in the ballpark for a set of paints, and I think I kind of see where they're going with the $30. Where they're going with the $30 is you get a paper pad that's got quite a bit of paper. If I had to say, it's probably about 15 to 20 sheets of paper, or maybe 12 to 15 sheets of paper. 48 half pans, a pretty decent solid plastic palette if you like plastic palettes. I know some people don't, but if you're okay with plastic palettes, this is actually a pretty decent plastic palette with removable compartments and removable half pans, as I said earlier in the video. So even if you wanted to dig the paints out, you could reuse the palette. As long as the ferrule on your brush isn't wiggling and wobbling around like one of mine was, then you get two pretty decent standard golden Teflon brushes that you can use to do a variety of paintings, both on the watercolor side, the acrylic side, or most water-soluble type mediums. And yeah, so is that all worth $30 if you just exclude the paints? Maybe, maybe not. I just think that if you're going to spend $28.99, there may be other paints on the market that you can target that may be of a little bit better, well, not maybe, but definitely will be of better quality. For 30 bucks, you can even break into the professional realm of paints. So if someone wants to ask me about a recommendation, this probably would not be the very first set of paints that I would recommend. However, if a person decided to buy these paints, they could definitely be painted with, they can definitely be practiced with, and then that person would just have to make the decision about whether they felt like the $30 price tag was worth what they got. So with that information, I hope you will be able to make the best decision based on your painting style and what you would like to include or exclude from your arsenal as to whether this is a set you think you would want to pick up for yourself. So there you have it, my friends. Hopefully you found, heard, saw, picked up on something that you thought was helpful in this video. Hopefully you have enjoyed hanging out on the channel throughout the month of July, throughout World Watercolor Month, just kind of talking about that and going throughout Thrifty Giveaway Month. Or you just enjoyed hanging out and watching the painting, the time-lapse, the demo. If you did, guys, don't forget to sprinkle a little love and give the video a thumbs up. You can share the video because sharing is caring, and maybe there's someone else out there who's been wondering a little bit about this particular set of paints. Do subscribe if you're new or returning and you haven't. Hit that notification bell so that you will know when we upload and we go live. Jump in the comment section. Let me know. Have you used this set of paints? Were you wondering about this set of paints? What do you think about this set of paints? I would really be interested and curious to know. Let's jump in the comments section, guys, and get a nice old discussion going on. You can check the video description for all of the relevant links. There's going to be paints, pencils, pastels, and markers, the Thrifty Apprentice sponsored Facebook group, the new Defiant Art website, the link to the Bamboo Voyager palette in case you're interested in purchasing them. We still have plenty of them in stock. So yeah, that is still available. You can find the most recommended product list, which is going to make suggestions about great products that won't break your pocket. You'll also find the artist wish list, and you will also find the link for Patreon if you would like to join us in the Thrifty Patreon community. Hopefully this was helpful to you guys. You have a great day. And remember, as I tell you at the end of every single video, just keep creating.